Hello, everyone. I am Stephen Tam. I'm the CTO here at Salesforce. I give this talk pretty regularly, and it's a twofold talk. Where the first part, I talk about the architecture of how Salesforce actually builds what we do and deliver it to you. In the second part, we talk about how we actually make product decisions and how we choose to build what we actually choose to build. I've worked at Salesforce for about a decade now. Done a whole bunch of stuff, and so if you have random questions, you can ask me later. There's a prelude. If you want to know more about sort of like the core of Salesforce, please come to the Yerba Buena Theater at 5 p.m. I'll introduce this at the end of the talk as well. Talk about true to the core. And if you have a lot of questions about Apex or performance, please come tomorrow at 12:30, and we'll have meet the developers. So almost everything that I'm talking about in this deck is actually real. But we are required to put up the safe harbor statement. Please make decisions based on the product that we have, not the products that I talk about, but pretty much everything that you'll see here is stuff that we actually have shipping in product. So these are some new slides where we're going to go over the architecture of how Salesforce is actually put together. What you heard us talk about yesterday was Lightning. And Lightning is a way that we are trying to take what we produce at Salesforce and have it so that the information that you need is wherever you are. Lightning is a way of rebuilding our presentation layer and putting it so it's in the hands of your pocket. If you're a call center agent, it's right in front of you on the screen with multiple monitors. But it means that what you see in the front when you actually use our product is a new redesigned user interface that's composable, built on top of our APIs. And so our APIs then provide you access to Force.com. If you're doing B2B or more employee-facing stuff, Heroku and Fuel, which is missing from the slide for customer-facing stuff, and the new Wave analytics platform. So the way that we view it internally is we have front-end services and back-end services, and Lightning is our front-end services. This is how we're trying to move forward. Before, you'd build Visualforce, which is much more of a HTTP server type language. And now we're moving more towards real distinction. But what does that mean? Most people here want to talk about what is it that we have in the back end? How is it that Salesforce is put together? Well, I'm going to go into an entire section later about multi-tenancy, but when you build on top of Salesforce, we have a very clear distinction between what we build and what you build. What you build, your customizations, your fields, your objects, your relationships, your Visualforce, your Lightning, your approvals, your reports and dashboards, are all maintained in a state which is very separate from what we do. You do not customize what we build. You build for yourself. And so we take your customizations and keep it very, very distinct from our multi-tenant application code base. And that provides a lot of benefits that we'll get to in a second. But that distinction means that when you build and use any of the features, we are able to upgrade our software, and your software will maintain continuity. So Salesforce Lightning is about this notion that we have where we build what we build, and we version our behaviors so that you get to customize and build exactly what you need to solve your business problems and not be subject to whenever we do our releases. So this is a new Lightning version component slide. It's new for those of you who haven't seen it before, where we maintain our cloud kernel, which runs core, Heroku, ExactTarget, BladeIQ. And then on top of that, we have APIs, SDKs that you can run on top of, and then you can build whatever you want that runs in the Salesforce One container on the mobile side. Or you can take what we build and deploy it into a community. You can take what we build and build it into an SDK like you saw with Coca-Cola. And so these version components are very, very important because they are the core of what we do, which is multi-tenant cloud computing. Now before, let's say 10 years ago, and you wanted to go build one of these applications, the first thing you'd have to do is get a whole bunch of servers. Then once you get a whole bunch of servers, you'd have to go buy some software, buy some web this and web that, and then try and deploy it and maintain it all yourself. But what Salesforce does is we make it so that the democracy is that you do not have to maintain your hardware, whether it's virtual or not. You do not have to maintain your own software. Our licensing is pay as you go. We upgrade you 3 times a year with major releases. We do releases every day. We make it so that you own your own data. We don't own your data, you do. And we make it so that as you, go back one. As you build your company to grow, we can grow with you, from just one user to hundreds of thousands of users. And we run on any device, and we make it so that you can take what we provide and reuse it in whichever fashion that you want. So the way that we do that is a lot of the functions that are provided by other platform as a service or infrastructure as a service companies, we maintain all of that for you. We maintain all the infrastructure as a service, the operating systems, the security. We keep you away from like the shell shocks and all those sorts of security problems. But we also provide you with row-level security. We provide you with column-level security. We have integration, sharing, OData, so that you don't have to build all that stuff from scratch and build it yourselves. And we also maintain all the operations. We have an identity cloud where you can use OAuth in order to make sure that you can reuse Salesforce in your Active Directory environment if that's what you use, or Salesforce can be the center of your identity. We monitor the application. We make sure that it's constantly improving. And it means that you get to concentrate on exactly what you want to, which is building at the right level. You don't have to build infrastructure. You don't have to build the platform. You don't have to build customizations. We provide the democracy for you so that you can have drag and drop tools to build the product that you need. So a little bit more about the security is that one of the hardest parts about building your own software is making sure that nobody will break in and making sure that you're not going to have one of those target sort of incidents, or more recently a Dropbox incident. So what it means is that we provide for you, and one of the biggest benefits that we do is that we maintain a level of security that is probably cost prohibitive for any one company, but as a platform we do. With trusted networks, with authentication options, with SSO, we have it so that we maintain the history of all the changes that have ever happened to your product. We make sure that our SSL accelerators are at the top of their game, that we don't use any insecure ciphers. We manage all that for you with multiple zones of trust. But the reason why we are able to provide all the innovation, we've been talked about them in most innovative company in the world, is because our secret sauce is multi-tenancy. It means that we can grow as you can. And what multi-tenancy is kind of like a condominium. A condominium is a very big, expensive, multi-million-dollar infrastructure investment. But inside that condominium, you have each individual apartment. It has shared water, it has shared power, it has shared sewer, and things like that, so that you pay for only what you need, which parts of the condominium complex that you need, and then inside each one of those sort of areas, each one of your users can inhabit. And they don't cross the streams. We have locks that make sure that you can't go from one organization to another, but it means that you can amortize, and we can amortize, the cost of these sort of security things, these sort of power and scale. So inside, we have what we call instances, which are groups of customers together on one of those condominiums, one of those shared services. We have somewhere between 40 to 100 actual servers running in each of these instances. We have about 100 actually or so versions of these. If you go to trust.salesforce.com, you'll see things like NA1, NA7, EU1, and those tell you which one of the condo complexes that your actual instance is in. And we can share services both across the instance so that as people are, if people are using it at the night much more often, or people are using it much more during the day, we can amortize between the two. We also make sure that every time we do any interactions with the database or with any of the infrastructure that you're using, we make sure that your tenant ID, what we call organization ID, makes it so that your data is always and permanently segregated from everybody else. We also take all the data that we have in one of these instances and we replicate it, usually to a place very far away. So if your data is in the UK, we will replicate your data to Germany. If your data is in Chicago, we will replicate it to Phoenix or Ashburn, Virginia. And we also have encryption inside the database so that if you choose to, you can make sure that the data is encrypted at rest. So our architecture is in these layers. We have a logic layer, we have a data layer, and then we have a presentation layer. And the way that we run it is we have three sort of multi-tenant storage layers. One runs in an RDBMS, Oracle 11g. We also use HBase, and we have our own file store that we internally call Salesforce that works in a way similar to Amazon S3. On top of that, we have our metadata layer, which is what you would know as force.com, which includes the UD, which is our sort of way of doing object relational mapping. It includes Apex, it includes Visualforce, it includes a lot of the details of our APIs. And then on top of that, you have S1 Lightning. And Salesforce One Lightning includes the site.com, the community cloud, and a series of services that you can reuse, including the open source Aura framework, in order to extend it. Our engineers internally generally write in Java. To a lesser extent, they write in SQL or SF-SQL, which is our sort of internal programming environment for building stored procedures. And more, we're building on top of our platform, not in our platform. So we internally use Sockle, we use Apex, we use Batch Apex, we use Scheduled Apex, we use Visualforce, and we use Lightning to build the code that we do. And because we produce containers, we often write in Dalvik, Java, Objective-C, and also in Windows in order to provide for you things like Salesforce files or the Salesforce One container. Now, inside that data metadata layer is most of the core IP of what we do. We make it so that we are able to reuse services like Search, our multi-tenant aware query optimizing engine, the way that we generate our UIs, to have it so that it is shared and cached in between them, but we make sure that each customer has their own segmentation. So we have a shared database table called sales.account. And when you're using accounts, you get one slice of it, like I had in the previous slide. But by having it so that we have shared infrastructure, but then all the data is segmented that way, it means that you get to benefit from having all the scale that we provide in one of these condominium complexes, even if you're using only one of the actual apartments. So the way that we scale is you can scale horizontally or you can scale vertically. But most of what we do now is to try and scale horizontally. And so what we do is inside each data center, we have a series of what we call instance groups. These instance groups have a series of shared services like SSL accelerators. They have certain amounts of storage, like SAN layers. And so that provides a series of isolation with shared services. And then inside each instance group, if you're using NA1 or if you're using NA7, you will be in one of those instance groups. And then we take that and we stamp it out multiple times so that you can choose which geographic location you're in based on how you do it. And so that is how we maintain isolation. And it turns out that when we produce our software, we roll it out to different data centers and different instances and instance groups at different times based on whether you're Salesforce, because we release to ourselves first, or if you're the most risk-averse, we release to you last, all within a month. And this is the eye chart slide that I'm going to move past, because this is actually the way that it all works, but you don't really want to know. So what does multi-tenancy mean? What does it mean for us? How is it that it makes it so that we can deliver to you faster? One is that there's no legacy. We have one version of the software that's out at a time. Technically two, because we stagger the releases as we go between instance groups. But it means that the version of the software that we had out in the wild 6 months ago is dead to us, and we never have to fix any bugs in that ever again. And it also means that when we fix bugs in one version, it's released to everybody within sometimes a day and usually within a month. So that if it's a critical fix, so that you don't have to pay attention to which version of Salesforce you're using the latest version. It also means that we have to maintain a higher level of standard of our quality than any other provider probably out there, because we have to maintain all of our API versions going back in history, and it means that we have to make sure that when we release on our schedule, we don't change what you're doing. We need our releases that we perform 3 times a year to be seamless. And so in order to do that, we run 250,000 plus, it's actually 310,000 plus tests every time anybody checks in. In addition, we require that when you write Apex code for yourself, you have to have 75% test coverage of the Apex code that you write. We run all of your tests every time we upgrade. That's part of our secret sauce. The reason why we make you write tests is to make it so that we don't break you when we upgrade. Every time we do one of our major releases, we run every test everybody has written and compare, did it fail before versus did it fail now. And by doing that, we can maintain the highest common denominator of quality of our code. Then we make it so that we have these staggered releases. Our pod architecture with different instances makes it so that we can have scalability from both. We have certain instances that have only one tenant on them because they're very, very large, to other instances that have more than 50,000 on them. And then we get to provide you with predictability. you know in advance how often we're going to release. We're going to release 3 major releases a year. We can tell you when they're going to be. We take about 5 minutes of downtime in order to do that upgrade. We release our UI and also our client code every month, and we do bug fixes every week. Because we only have one version of the code, it means that you can benefit from having the latest version every time. And all of this is backed by what we call agile development, or adaptive delivery methodology, where we have each one of our teams operate independently with their own product owner and management, and that we all are able to concentrate on our features, build them in our own sort of stack, and then promote them into the main environment. That means that if you go talk to the Sales Cloud or the Service Cloud, we try to minimize dependencies between them. They all own their own destiny, so that you can see things like Lightning come out, and then that is on the same schedule, in a sense, as the people that are building forecasting. So when you put all this together, it means that multi-tenancy makes lives for us much easier as developers, and that makes it so that the next part of this, which is how do we make life better for you? And the way that we make life better for you is it means that we can have some of the best people in the world working on scaling what we do. So over the past year, we have increased the number of transactions that we perform 51%. And at the same time, we have reduced, over the past 2 years, we've reduced the amount of time it takes each transaction by over 1/3. And so by having one version that we're able to constantly optimize, we have it so that we are faster and are able to scale more than we ever have in the past. And so that unlimited transactions at scale, whether you're a small customer or a large customer, that's the benefit that you see from multi-tenancy. Now, one of the things that I've been talking about internally is what I call the Salesforce way, which is, why is it that Salesforce does what we do? Now, we were the first to the cloud, service as a subscription, but what is it that makes us what we are? And so internally, we have this process by which we manage the corporation, and we call it the V2MOM process, where we write down what's the vision and values behind our company, what are the methods by which we are going to achieve those vision and values, and then also write down and order what is going to be in our way. And so writing down the principles of how Salesforce does what it does means that we have, even though we have a lot of developers working internally, we are able to maintain sort of a notion of what Salesforce is. And we are the cloud, we are the trusted business critical platform, we value expressiveness, we are democratic, we care about the smallest customer, the largest customer, the nonprofit. We want to look and feel like one product. We want Sales and Service Cloud to work the same and feel the same because you don't care. You want them to be the same. We want you to adopt our service and use it and love it. And we want to make sure that we do not have internal strife that exposes our internal organization to you. And so having a unified architecture, this is sort of the principles behind what we do. Now, those principles lead us to say what makes us different from our competitors. We actually embrace social much before others. And so we have a built-in system of engagement tied to what your data is. So we have real files, a real social graph. We embraced mobile and mobile connectivity in such a way that we're rebuilding our entire UI from it. We embrace all open standards. We have contributed to Apache. We really want to make it so that all the stuff that we build that's client code is owned by you. And also we're real time, which means that you can get the information that you want when you want it now. And so all of that is the Salesforce One platform powered by multi-tenancy. And that leads us to have some really good benefits. Like we have the leading ecosystem for business apps, which is the App Exchange. Because we all work and act like one platform that's common between it all. Hi, Shauna. It makes it so that we can have all of these applications built that you can install into your system with very little effort. And so by putting that all together, it makes it so that we provide with multi-tenancy a way where, as an ISV, I can build an app and then distribute it to all hundreds and thousands of customers that Salesforce has. And a lot of the infrastructure that I would have to do otherwise is gone. So we don't believe in middleware, we don't believe in any of that stuff. And so by making it so that we crave adoption, we want you to use the cloud, we want you to put these products together, means that we can have it so that you have an expanded sort of suite of business applications that you can use to do whatever you want. Okay, and now I just hit 20 minutes, so we're halfway through. And so at this point, does anybody out there have any questions? Since Mayor's not here, but Susan and Martin are, about how we deliver the product that we do. Can you use the microphone? I don't have one with me. You guys can come up if you want. You good, Susan?
You showed 200 milliseconds. Does it include all the network latency as well, or just the transaction? What layer the 200 milliseconds is coming from?
That's the 200 milliseconds is in and out. So that is, the request comes in and then we serve it. It doesn't include network latency from the origin data center to if you're in India or China or Norway.
Thank you.
Is there another microphone up here, by the way? Okay.
In terms of instances, we've gone through a couple of org splits. Is there any plan to kind of consolidate, make the instances larger so customers aren't constantly switching from one instance to another?
No, we're actually trying, instance splits suck, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's true, it's very heavyweight. We're switching to one where if we are going to try and migrate org by org, so that instead of having this heavyweight where you have to duplicate everything and then you have to change all of your stuff, it's supposed to be lesser. If you use things like org domains, so that you're my domains, so that you don't use any one.salesforce but use another thing, it makes it a lot simpler. But we are going to try and reduce the cost of splits and do them fewer and instead do it more org by org. But that's unfortunately not going to be around for about a year.
Okay. And as a follow-on to that, what's the solution for folks that want to do a global org, right? Because they're the ones that feel that type of thing the most because they really can't have any downtime. They're on 24/7.
Over the next year and a half, unfortunately, the session conflicts with mine, which is the one about addition-based redefinition. The goal is to have it so that there is zero planned downtime. What we're going to have is a read-only mode where for a very short amount of time, you may not be able to do write traffic. General write traffic, there'll be some exceptions to that. And so that the perception will be that we are never down.
Okay.
And so splits right now are really annoying because they require lots of downtime, and we're working on it.
All right, thank you.
My question is, I've heard that the search infrastructure was based on some version of Lucene. How do you manage multi-tenancy regarding the search, all the search features that you have in Salesforce?
That's a good question. We actually keep each Solar index and Lucene index in its own file. And they are partitioned actually by the organization and also by object type. And when you do a query, the query can only hit one of those orgs at a time, and we actually don't mix any of the data between tenants while doing indexing.
Okay, thank you.
So we never do that. In fact, that's a point of contention internally because some people want to do that, and we won't let them. So
that's true. Thank you.
Good times. Okay, time for one more before I get to the product management. So now that I have Shauna here, it's great. Yes.
Hi, question about the workload migration failover, actually. So when your process running, do you folks do active checkpoint restart of a process so that if the process dies, the machine dies, it automatically comes up on another machine?
In most cases, yes. We have a queuing system based on Apache Cupid, where we store in the database, and then once the task has been performed, we then remove it. And so if the process dies, then it doesn't commit to the database, and then we move on.
So you do checkpoint, the checkpointing at the memory level and the process state level?
We actually do it on the row level. So generally, if it's the database transaction is sort of our.
So it's more at the application level then.
Yeah, and that's. For most things, we then say, if I'm going to perform a process on 100 million rows, we chunk it into certain segments, and then those segments can each restart, but not necessarily overall.
Okay. So just another quick question. The container technology, is that pretty much across the board, or is that specific to Heroku platform?
Can you ask me that question later?
The container technology which you folks use for isolation, the multi-tenancy?
We actually they're physically separated. For multi-tenancy, I can explain it more later, but I got to get to the next part of my deck. Sorry. That was like 3 questions. But it's okay. And Mayor didn't show up because he's at the other thing that conflicts with this. Okay. So that's how we put things together. But one of the questions I always asked here is, why can't you just fix my feature? And so as part of this sort of talk, I put these slides together about what it means. And so we've been around for 15 years. And Salesforce does a lot of stuff. And so sales and service are very different from 5 years ago. There was no such thing as an iPad 5 years ago. The fact that your mobile device contains more power than your laptop did 5 years ago is new. Email is sort of the way that you talk to people you don't know. Social is the way that you talk to people you do. United breaks guitars. There's all this like, sort of ubiquity of a new way of doing communication. And client server is back. If you look at the way that processing happens on your phone is so powerful that people just put all your data on your phone. And so the web has moved to mobile, and sort of these new sort of technologies are here. And so Salesforce, when you look at Lightning and when you look at the Analytics Cloud, is very forward-looking. Now, the unfortunate thing about being forward-looking is that, well, no, let me do this first. And that we're investing in the future. So we buy companies like RelateIQ, and we buy companies like ExactTarget, and we're concentrating on moving into new fields and having it so that we have a broad suite to solve the problems our customers have. However, a lot of that means that we didn't really invest much in Sales Cloud, and we didn't really invest much in the platform. And it started with an idea, which was that the next theme of Salesforce should be fixing the core Salesforce, stuff that's been here for 15 years. Then there was a blog written by a guy who now works here called Button Click Admin about how we have to do true to the core. And then a chatter group. And then 2 years ago, there was kind of an open revolt. And Parker was there, Shauna was there, I was there, where all the customers got up and said, why don't you fix Sales Cloud? And so this true to the core notion is really important. And it means that we sort of lost the fact that we were listening to you. And so there were lots of complaints. The first one was that all the CRM that we provide wasn't customizable using the platform. There were first-class objects and second-class citizens. There was some UI that was very difficult to use. It's still there around profiles. There were some technically difficult backlog items I'll get to in a second. There were some things that people wanted fixed, but if we fixed them, we would have broken all of our customers. And as I said, we're multi-tenant. We have to bring you forward. A lot of the questions were about integration between our products. And then a lot of it was, I have this Windows phone and BlackBerry. I have a BlackBerry. Why doesn't it work on BlackBerry? So when you categorized the complaints, you came to us through chatter. You yelled at us. You used the idea exchange. We do customer surveys where all you did was complain. And then you did a lot of yelling on Twitter. I get a lot of them. A lot of people learned that they can just @mention Benioff and then somebody will respond. And then you filled a bunch of support cases. So when you take all of these together, we got sort of loud and clear the message. And we want to thank you for reminding us. We use agile development, which means that each team is sort of independent. But that means that each team wants to make progress every 3 months, which means that a lot of the larger features that take maybe a year to perform and bring all of you with us take take time. The quality effort for older features is much higher because the sort of test-driven development is more of a more modern feature and wasn't there at the beginning when we were a startup. And the way that we've evolved our platform, especially how we try and build on and not in the platform, means a lot of the older stuff is actually hard to touch. But we never want to rest on our laurels. We don't want to say that we don't work on that anymore. We want to make it so that if you're using it and it's a widely adopted feature, it keeps improving. So what do? So how do we prioritize these features? Well, if Will Moxley was not in the Sales Cloud keynote right now, he'd be here and telling me about it. And so what we do is we prioritize based on user adoption. We want to make sure that you want to use and crave our product first. We then say what features should we build based on customer surveys or CIO summits or various sort of impact. We look at the idea exchange. And then a lot of features we decide to not build for you based on strategic importance. The app exchange is there, and it often provides the functionality that people need. However, if you looked at the keynote yesterday, given by Linda, the Linda section, you saw that we put tasks and notes into the app. And some people say, why did we do that? It's like, because tasks is what drives a salesperson's day, and that's why we prioritized it ahead. The other thing that you saw was the little chevrons that guide you through the process, and that's called Sales Coach now, I think. Is that called Sales Coach? Sales Path, pardon me. And so that's to say that the stage-based objects that you move, like a lead or an opportunity or a case, to move it through. But the third thing and most important is rebuilding our desktop and improving our UI, because if you've used Salesforce recently on the desktop, it does feel a little 2003. And so that's the way that we've organized it. Now, a lot of things that people want us to do in Sales Cloud, we're not going to do. Now, why is that? We listen to you, and we want to do what you say, but we have to prioritize all of it together. So we have increased CRM development dramatically. In the past, we did a lot of things like Chatter that kind of annoyed you, and we bought companies like ExactTarget, Buddy Media that annoyed you, but we are investing in CRM. We are delivering the #1 asked for feature, which is email marketing in Pardot. So please go look at Pardot. It's great stuff. They have a really nice booth. They purchased all this fancy furniture from Cost Plus Market. You should go see it. We created a whole series of new internal teams and increased staffing on Sales Cloud. Sales Cloud at one point was down to about 5 developers. It's now more than 10 times that, and it's a pretty big investment. And we focused on being true to the core. We have Sean is running the thing at 5 o'clock. You can come to about how we're actually concentrating on doing the Sales Cloud stuff that you need and the Service Cloud stuff that you need. And we measure ourselves very highly on how many of these ID exchange points that we produce. And so the 2 top one that you wanted was reporting on approval history and opportunity splits. We delivered this in the past year. But it's not just the big ones, it's also the small ones. So Bass Elite reports and descriptions of IP ranges were actually feature requests made here at Dreamforce last year during the True to the Core session. And based on that, we went and implemented them. I mean, I went and implemented them, personally, because #coding_CTO. But we listened to you, and we are trying to deliver the features that you need, and that is sort of the give and take that we have here at Dreamforce. So please, if there's something that's really bugging you, find me later. So we delivered big ideas. State and country as a pick list is done. Yay! And it was really, really hard, and I'll get into why. Approval headers, and so we go through and we have produced a lot of features that customers have a significant amount of demands for. But it's not just the big features. We also do the small ones. Small ones that just one company really needs, but it's critical to their business. And we find it strategic, and then we implement it. And so the idea exchange is one very large way that you can contribute to the product prioritization process. So the next thing that people ask me is, that's great, Tam, why aren't you just fixing this for me? And if Natalie was in front of me, she would say that too. The first reason is that we don't want to break people. We have to bring you with us. We release 3 times a year, and so not breaking the code base and not breaking our customers is our #1 value. And we have to bring you with us. We don't retire API versions. We're not Twitter. We actually understand that we are mission critical to what you do. And so in order to solve your problems, we try and make it so that we value continuity over new features. And a lot of times there are workarounds in the App Exchange, or often the features are incredibly complex. So multiple context per activity, which internally we call many-who, was the notion that if I have an activity in Salesforce, I should be able to put everybody that was in the meeting. And it was, took a year and a half. And it was very, very complicated because we have a very rich platform, and people wrote reports that said, if the related to on the activity's name contains Stephen. So if I have more than one person in the meeting named Stephen, should I have 2 activities listed in the report for each person named Stephen, or just 1 activity in the report? And so that's the kind of stuff that we had to work through. State country as a pick list is even worse. If your data started with just the 2-character country code, or was it the country listed out, we don't know what you meant if you said the country starts with BH. Did you mean Bahrain or Bhutan? Independent page layouts, which we're working around through a different means right now with Lightning, is really complicated. Like, what should I do on mobile if it's supposed to be 2-column or 1-column layout? So these sorts of complications are why sometimes people say it would be really easy for you to fix it, and it just isn't. But we value consistent improvement. We are offline API first, mobile second, web third. We want to make it so that you don't need any middleware. We want to migrate customers to stay at their own pace. We want to provide all the values that we provided at the beginning of that I was talking about earlier. And so we always try and make our product better, because that is the way that we get adoption, and that's why we have this crazy conference here. So how can you help? There are a bunch of different ways in which you can provide us with information. The first, as I said, is the ID exchange, excuse me. Go to idea.salesforce.com, join the success community. It's tied in with the Dreamforce app. And then ask your questions, provide new ideas, talk to support if it's a bug, find an MVP community if you're not an MVP, and go get them to come yell at us and figure it out. But if it's broken, we want to know. So if it's actually a bug, if it actually doesn't work the way it's supposed to, not a feature, please just break through the barriers of Tier 1 and Tier 2 and make it so that we know. This is the problem I get. Then join the Dreamforce community. Go to dreamforce.com, join the chatter groups, talk to people that have your problems. crowdsource your ideas. I respond on the Dreamforce community and provide that sort of feedback, and a lot of developers do. If you use Apex, please go to the discussion boards. The Apex team, the API team follow it, and you can get a lot of the answers. And please, again, go to the True to the Core session at 5 p.m. at the Europe Theater. And if you want to know more about multi-tenancy, go search for multi-tenant white paper from force.com written by our previous CTO. In your favorite search engine. It comes up first in both Google's and Bing's. And then there's the multi-tenant magic webinar. If you Google that, multi-tenant magic webinar, it'll also come up that explains how we actually do what we do. And then I'm not super active on Twitter unless it involves haikus. So you can do at Tamforce, and then I'll respond that way. So that's sort of a whirlwind tour of how Salesforce does product prioritization and figure out what we're going to build. And we have about 3 minutes left. And so if you have any questions for how we build the products, please come to the microphones. No one does. That's fine. You go to the mic. If you have a question, go to the microphone. But you know.
I was wondering, inside the data centers, how do you manage? Do you have some kind of automation or abstraction layer that, like you get on the Amazon, web services you have, and you can create virtual machines? Are you using something like this, or do you have more hands-on management? We
use Puppet. And we're increasingly moving towards more virtualization. We're in the process of moving to mostly virtualization for everything except the database layer.
Okay.
So we do. There's a talk about that that's happening, I think, tomorrow.
All right.
I don't know, John, do you know when it's happening? You don't know? There's a talk about how we automate the data center. Shane Ziegler is the handler on it. I don't know who's actually doing it. But we didn't do a lot of virtualization in the past, and that was bad. ExactTarget's actually pretty good as well at virtualization. And Heroku, obviously, that's all they do. There's this whole talk about pets and cattle. If you go Google that, you can have Hansman talk to you about it. It's great. Good times. OK. Well, with that, thank you, everybody. Please go to the SMB seminar, SMB keynote next if you are a small or medium business. And I'll be here for another 5 minutes to